evening and welcome to Highline Heritage Museum, 7 Stories. Tonight there's a wonderful lineup for your listening pleasure, and go ahead and make sure those cell phones are off. And Peggy will be your MC tonight. Anytime we do a gathering at the museum, we like to take a moment to recognize that we are on native land. Please think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. And on behalf of the museum, we really appreciate memberships and donors. We are a private museum. We're not getting a bunch of, government funding or anything. So everything that we do here, we really appreciate any donations you can make. And without further ado, Peggy, if you'd like to come on up.
So welcome. This is my first 7 Stories of the new year. And here we are in this beautiful space. And look what we have. The beautiful salmon just floating above our heads. It's just magical, isn't it? So I have a few little announcements to make. And we'll start out with a local authors event on March 2nd. March 2nd? Yes. Thank you. There will be 4 local authors reading from their works on March 2nd here at the museum. If you are interested in that, which I think would be really nice, supporting our local talent, you can get more information about that. And 7 Stories, as you probably already know, tonight we're talking about the perfect storm, aligned and positive, or a hot mess. That's the one I kind of like. I want to hear about that. And next month, we'll be doing Paths Not Taken or diary entries. Just a little heads up to think about for the future. Tonight, we have 1 empty space for another story. So if you would like to tell a story, kind of impromptu, 7 minutes, you can ask to do that. We have space number 6. That gives you some time to think about it.
And Peggy,
yes.
That could be on any theme, right?
Oh, yeah, you don't have to do the theme. As a matter of fact, sometimes we stray from it anyway. So if you have something you want to share, then please do. The other thing I would like to say is, as you know, my name is Peggy, and I've been associated now with 7 Stories for a few years. And I actually love literature, I love theater, poetry, and the spoken word. And I can't write a play, but every once in a while I can tell a story. And I can't tell you how much I enjoy hearing your stories when you come to 7 Stories. It's a real treat and very nice for our community. So tonight we're here in the museum instead of in the small conference room. We have more space for everybody, and we're really happy about that. However, we are a nonprofit, and we do have to pay for this larger space. So conveniently, right up here as you walk by, little plastic box, if you would like to make a contribution to 7 Stories tonight, we'd encourage you to do that. And also, we encourage you to support the museum. It's a real treasure for Highline and for Burien. So there we have that. Now, what's my next housekeeping thing? I'm here on short notice tonight. I think I've covered most of that. So, okay, I'm going to stand on it and hug it. Is that better? How do we adjust the...
Get your lips right up to it, almost touchy.
Ooh, that's sanitary. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so for the next speaker, please remember you have to almost kiss this microphone. Robert McFall. This is really tiny print, and my glasses are old, so am I. Is our first speaker tonight. He loves good Scotch and bad prose. That's a man for my heart. I love that. He has recently retired to his hometown of Puyallup to pursue his many interests, which include storytelling, comedy, and short story writing. So, Robert, please join us with your story tonight.
So I am a hot mess because I was supposed to tell my story last month. So the topic will be slightly different than you may have been expecting to hear. It's good to be 10 years old, especially during the summertime. I had a bicycle. I had a mom-defined area of operations, and I had direct orders to stay out of the house as much as possible during the daytime. And near our house was War Memorial Park down in downtown Puyallup. The park had a big wading pool that would hold us all when it got really hot. And it had a creepy old gym that smelled like 50 years of sweat and frustration. And it had a playground full of old equipment that was just dangerous enough that it was very attractive to self-styled big kids like my 10-year-old self. It was the place for all the cool kids to be, and Puyallup Parks and Rec had found funding to do free programs for kids all summer long. Now, that laissez-faire attitude about safety that applied to the playground equipment also applied to some of the recreational events. So one fine day, I took myself to the park, and there was this sign, and it said, "Today, pancake eating contest, great prizes." But that's it. There wasn't an explanation of the 3-page parental signature required waiver. There wasn't a nut allergy warning, and there was no gluten-free division. It was just pancakes and corn syrup. I love pancakes. I also love prizes, and my parents had been constantly talking about how I seemed to have gotten 2 hollow legs. So I thought I had a chance at fame and to become a local legend by winning that contest. And besides, I was hungry. I hadn't eaten lunch yet, so I signed up. So they set us all down at tables, and they brought out a plate with 3 pancakes on us and a cup of grape Kool-Aid and set it in front of us. And then the high school student rec director got up to explain it, and he's like, "Stop, stop, stop, don't start. Let me explain how this works first. So we're going to do this in rounds. You're going to have 3 pancakes and 10 minutes to eat them. And we'll go round by round by round till last man standing wins. If you get up and leave the table, you're out of the contest. And you can have as much grape Kool-Aid as you want, just ask, and every 10 minutes we'll start a new 3 pancakes. Now you can start. Go." Now the reason I love pancakes is my mom. My mom could cook anything. And so for me, pancakes meant pancakes made from sourdough starter from scratch, usually laced with the huckleberries that we picked and froze every summer. I would give anything for one more Saturday morning breakfast of those pancakes. So my first bite of the contest pancake, to say the least, it was a disappointment. This wasn't some soft, airy, fruit-filled confection. It was chewy. And I look over at the area where they have a grill set up, and there's this big bag, and it says Krusty's Pancake Mix, spelled with a K and a Z. But I took a sip of grape Kool-Aid and started eating pancakes, and they weren't so bad. And the first round, I got through my 3 pancakes with no problem, and almost half of the competitors dropped out after 3 pancakes. And so I wait a few minutes and we start round 2 and they bring me 3 more pancakes and I asked for 2 cups of Kool-Aid and downed them and I started eating and then I kind of got into a routine. Take a sip of grape Kool-Aid, chew, swallow. Sip, chew, swallow, repeat. And I just plowed through that second round. But so did everybody else. All of the weak competition was gone and we were all still chewing after 6 pancakes. And by the next break, I had a few minutes, and again, I was pumped up, and I was ready for anything, probably because I'd had more Kool-Aid than I usually had in a week, and corn syrup. I mean, we're talking serious sugar high. I was like, bring it on. Chew, sip, swallow, repeat. Chew, sip, swallow, repeat. I'm sorry, sip, chew, swallow, repeat. And we start the third round, and it gets more intense, but we're also all little kids. And the competition got smaller. It was like people were dropping like flies stuck in syrup. And I made it through 9 pancakes. And I'm looking around, and there's only 3 of us left. There's this kid sitting next to me that's at least twice my size. And right across from me is this little tiny girl, maybe 6 or 7. And so I'm considering the odds, and I think I might still have a chance because that big kid, he's kind of pale and he's sweating and he looks a little green. And I was 10, I have to admit, I was a total misogynist. There was no way a little girl was going to beat me. And so they bring us our 10th through 12th pancakes, and they come and they're just floating in syrup, and the server says, we ran out of butter, so we gave you more syrup. The big kid takes a bite, spits it out, and dashes to the bathroom. And I look across, and this little girl grins at me, and she just starts eating. And so I'm eating. I get through pancake number 10, but I'm slowing down, and she sets her fork down. She's eaten 12 pancakes. I take a tiny bite of the 11th pancake. I get it down. I take an even tinier second bite. And halfway through that pancake, I had to stop. My jaws wouldn't work, my stomach wouldn't work. I'd had 10 and a half pancakes and about half a gallon of grape Kool-Aid. And so, even though I had to lose to a girl, I was done. So I got second place, which was a big bag of candy. I know the poster said great prizes. For some reason, that didn't seem so great about then. But I went home and I recovered, though I think that night I probably didn't eat as many of my mom's chicken drumsticks as I would have. But I learned 2 lessons. 1, misogyny is bad, and never underestimate a woman, even if she's not very big. And 2, sometimes becoming famous and a local legend has a price tag that we just can't afford. And since then, I've learned cost-benefit analysis because some things aren't worth it. And I've never entered a food eating contest again. I don't drink grape Kool-Aid, and I do not eat Krusty's pancake mix. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Eric Matheson. Eric's story is about an important and maybe unexpected friendship, possibly a brush with greatness. Eric returns with another great story. Come on up.
Well, I'm going to be off theme too tonight. I wasn't able to come last time because I had cataract surgery. Don't poke me in the eye here. I'm going to have cataract surgery again next week. And so hopefully I won't have to wear glasses all the time like I've been doing since grade 7 or 8. So it's going to be an adventure for me, I guess. So what I want to talk about was 1975. I was 28 years old. I had bombed out at my first journalism college job right out of college. And my wife at the time got me a job down in the circulation department at the Seattle Times on the first floor. And she was up on the second floor in classified. And they shared the floor with the newsroom. And in the newsroom was this guy, Jerry Gay was his name, and he was 28 years old, the same age as me, and he just won a Pulitzer Prize for photojournalism. And, that was a big deal. The Pulitzer Prize is kind of like the Academy Award for journalists. So this was a big deal. And my wife notified me that, she noticed, that kind of the young women on the floor, kind of like to go into the dark room with Jerry, and help him out. And, couldn't really blame them. He was He was talented. He was good looking. He'd, won a Pulitzer Prize before he was the age of 30. So anyway, and he wasn't really just a one-shot wonder. He went on to work at other major newspapers in Los Angeles and in New York. Had some books, made some photo books, won a lot more awards. But, after this Pulitzer, I kind of lost track of him. So in our story here, we're going to zoom ahead almost 4 decades. And now the time is 2012, and by some miracle, I'd been back in journalism for about 10 years. I was editor of my hometown newspaper, the Highline Times. And, and that was the paper, that I read as a kid and sort of, it was one of the things that got me interested in journalism as a kid. So one of the jobs of a community newspaper editor is to, communicate, work with other community groups. And in this case, it was the Des Moines Library, and they were doing this photo contest for students during the summer, and they wanted somebody from the paper to help judge it. And so I asked my managing editor, I said, oh, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to judge this contest? He said, no, we'll get Jerry Gay to judge. I said, yeah, and we're going to get Pete Carroll to come down here and coach the Mount Rainier High School football team. This was just, that was just beyond me. So, but sure enough, Jerry had a relationship with the publisher, and he came down and he, came down, judged the contest, and then the managing editor set up a meeting between Jerry and me. And, I was very apprehensive, very skeptical. I thought, he'd be kind of a pompous jerk, and he actually had some reason to be, for this little editor here. But he turned out to be a really nice guy. And the upshot of this meeting was that me, the Wenatchee Daily Washout, was now going to give photo assignments to a Pulitzer Prize winner. Wow. And so, he didn't really need me to go out there and supervise these photo shoots, but I went along with him because, it's fun, and I really learned a little bit about, the habits of very effective people who are touched by greatness. We'd get there early, he'd talk to the people, get to know them, and then, when he did his photo shoot, the image that he had, here of what he wanted for that photo, he would get it, into the camera. And so, that was a great thing to learn. And also what I enjoyed, being around Jerry is, he would tell stories about his amazing career, including, this Pulitzer Prize-winning photo, which actually was taken right here in Burien down at 3 Point. And so, he told me it was a kind of a slow news day, and his photo editor didn't have anything to, much of an assignment, except that, there was this fire down in some Seattle suburb. So by the time he, by the time he got there, the fire was over, and the firefighters were just kind of slumped over, resting. And at the time, they were, volunteer firefighters, and so they were just starting to realize, that they'd have to go home, shower, and then go on to their regular 8-hour day job after fighting this fire all night long. So his photo, if you've ever been to the Tin Room Theater and gone into the theater in the lobby, there's a copy of it. I don't know if it's still there, but it's there. And it's kind of a ghostly black and white photo, and it kind of evokes the same kind of photos that were coming out of the Vietnam War. So his editors called it Lull in the Battle, and this is what won the Pulitzer Prize in 1975 when he was 28, and I was working in circulation. So anyway, and then another fun thing with Jerry was, the story is about his amazing career. I was down, going down to a photography convention down south, and his editors asked him to stop in Colorado. The police had jailed this guy from Washington State named Ted Bundy, and the people, the Seattle editors were wondering, did this guy have any connection to the mysterious, Ted that people had mentioned in disappearances of young women in the Seattle area, including one at a bar right up here on Ambaum and 128th. As we know now, Ted Bundy was a serial killer, all right, in 3 different states, and was executed by the state of Florida. So Jerry was locked. Jerry was locked into this cell with the serial killer for an entire afternoon. And he took photos of Ted Bundy while Ted Bundy was looking at his legal papers. Then about 3 weeks after that, the FBI came by to see Jerry, and Ted Bundy had escaped from the jail, and they had no idea how he did it. All they knew was that some other guy had been locked in a cell alone with him for 3 hours with a giant camera bag. And so they suggested that, that Jerry don't leave town without notifying the FBI. And then, another Ted Bundy story is Jerry went down to his parents in Tacoma, and to show him some photos, and Ted's stepdad, was sitting around the kitchen table, looking at the photos with Jerry, and all of a sudden, the front door flew open, and it was Ted Bundy's mother, and she said, "Where are you? Blankety blank, get out, and Jerry explained, "Well, your husband told me to come on in," and then he looked, and Ted's stepdad was way down the hall. So these great stories, but the thing that really was most important to me was that we became friends. We would talk and joke, and he'd tell me these stories, and I'd tell him stories, and we came to my retirement party, and took photos with me and my family, and even helped out in the kitchen. And so I would say, that actually the most important thing to me was this friendship. That was the most important part of my brush with greatness.
Thank you, Eric. I'm glad your brush with greatness was with the photographer and not with Ted. I think most of us are glad we never had the opportunity to meet him, but thanks for sharing that. Our next speaker and storyteller is Sven Arvidsson, and the people-pleasing Sven learned as a child. To please people, but it grew to ridiculous and unsustainable levels, resulting in moments where he definitely could be called a hot mess. So welcome, Sven.
So I only practiced this a few times, and each time I did it, it was different, so I'm going to definitely be a hot mess up here. It's the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, 2015. And I'm walking around between the different seminars, getting an insight into how different video game companies make their games. And I'm going to some of the studios of people's projects I was already aware of and getting a look behind the scenes, under the hood, how they did things. And I'm even seeing new things I hadn't heard of before and getting a little bit of entertainment out of that. But for the most part, I'm not really getting anything out of it. I'm not there for that. If I paid a third the price I did for the ticket to go there, maybe it would have been worth it. I'm really there to go and get a 3D animator modeler for my project. I tried to do my own 3D modeling and animating, but it wasn't up to snuff, and I didn't want to take the time to do that, considering I wanted to finish my game project in a year. That was my goal. And so what I would do is I would go up to these different booths of independent game developers, and I would feign interest in their projects. I didn't care at all about what they were doing. I was just there to try to network and try to get that 3D modeler and animator. So I would do a beautiful segue after feigning interest, and I would hand them a business card and be like, if you know any 3D animators or modelers, send them my way. And the look on their face, I can only describe as disgust. And there was sometimes someone to the side who wasn't as much part of the conversation who would be like a little bit more empathetic to my approach and be like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we'll send them your way. And I flew back to Philadelphia, and I was broken. I was humiliated, embarrassed by all these interactions, and yeah, it was really hard for me for a long time. The video game project I was working on, called The Spiral, it was about depression, and coincidentally, I had my own bout of severe depression for the length of working on that project. And it actually lasted like 7 years beyond that, and I'm all good now. I'm not going to get into that. That was already another story. And that's why I can be up here telling you about it, is that I actually look back on it all now, and I think it's kind of funny. You don't have to think it's funny. That's just my sense of humor. So I want to go back to my childhood. In the environment of my family, I grew up to be a people pleaser, being the youngest in the family, whatever. I don't need to get into all that. And I think the place that you might find funny about me being a people pleaser is I'm talking to somebody that I know pretty well, and they want to talk about a piece of media. And I haven't seen this movie, let's say. And they're like, oh, yeah, have you seen that movie? And I'm like, oh, yeah, they want to talk about it. Sure, yeah, I saw that movie. And then they proceed to ask me a question about, oh, and the main character did that thing, at the climax or the ending. Like, what do you think he was thinking? Or what did that mean? And then this is the first time I've heard any information about this movie. I'll be like, and then give some non-committal response that doesn't really make sense. And looking at their face, I can see they're just like, you clearly didn't see this movie. Why did you say you did? And they're like, okay. And I leave confused, being like, why did I say I watched that movie? I didn't. So that's the people-pleasing dynamic. When I was about 15, I started establishing what I call my sense of artistic aesthetic. And that was in major conflict with the people-pleasing dynamic. And that's what you saw a little bit at that game developers conference. But it also showed up in various ways that weren't artistic endeavors. I would, in conversations with people, sometimes it would get to a point where I didn't like what somebody said from a sense of aesthetic. And I would suddenly say something that sort of made sense in context, but there's a lot of profanity thrown into it and like anger directed at them, and they were shocked and confused about where did this anger suddenly come from. And I was shocked and confused looking at myself just a moment ago and being like, who was that? I didn't say that. And then in actual artistic endeavors, that is not a great combination to work with. I was maybe not from their perspective, but I felt like I was a very difficult person to work with. Because what would happen is they would talk about this idea they wanted to have happen and be like, oh, wouldn't it be great if this, or oh, we should do this thing. And I see their enthusiasm, and the people-pleasing part of me is like, oh yeah, I'll totally do that. I'll facilitate this thing, And about a week or a month or whatever amount of time later, I'm sitting there being like, I hate this. I never wanted to do this in the beginning. This isn't my aesthetic. And I would feel all bitter and used and all this other stuff, and that's not fair to them, that's not fair to me. So I recognize that I work best alone. And the one place where there's actually an exception to that is I actually work with my wife on card games and board games, because we already had a deep enough understanding of each other and know where the boundaries are and everything. And I'm not going to pretend that we're perfect. Of course, there's moments of, me not being very, whatever. I don't need to get into that. But, so looking back on myself in all these situations where you could consider me a bit of an ass, I like to imagine a scenario on my deathbed where everyone who sort of knows me comes and talks to me and tells me all the times where I was such an ass. Because I think it's funny. Because I'm not that much person, I'm not as much that person anymore. Less and less, day by day, I'm recognizing all these things and learning to live with them. And it will show me how much I have grown. And perhaps some of you will get to know me, and you'll be at my deathbed and telling me about this story I was telling you and how much of an ass I was up here. And I think that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven. And for the record, I appreciate everything you said, and I don't think you're an ass. And I hope you come back. Our next speaker is Becky Chan. All right. Becky comes to 7 Stories from Fresh Ground Stories in Seattle, and she's getting ready to go to the Moth Main Stage March 1st in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Wow. This Moth Main Stage is a curated event with 5 selected storytellers from around the country. We are here to support her in this momentous journey. Thank you for sharing a story with us tonight. That is so cool.
So I did get my start at Fresh Ground Stories, which is every third Thursday. The next one, it's being held in Queen Anne, and the next theme is mountains, molehills out of, what is that? Sorry, English is not my first language. Thank you, that. So hope you can make it. I apologize if you've heard of this story before, but I also thank you if you heard of this story before, because I told this 2 years ago at Benaroya Hall at the main stage, and I was so happy that they called me back to go to Jackson Hole next week. But I need to practice. So thank you so much for allowing me to come at the last minute to share with you my story. Hope you like it. I was at the Hong Kong International Airport at the immigration office, waiting to meet someone I had known about for a long time. She had no idea who I was. She's the queen of human smuggling, the mother of all snakeheads. She's Sister Ping, a fugitive of the FBI. And I was the FBI agent who would escort her back to the United States to face the law. Sister Ping walked in, Hong Kong police on each side of her. She's handcuffed. They uncuffed her, and I put flexi cuffs on her. Basically, they're just heavy-duty zip ties from Home Depot. We set her down at the table with her possession in front of her in a Ziploc bag, and I could see stacks of cash, passports, and a gold Rolex with diamonds around it. I had a Rolex like that once. I bought it on Canal Street in New York's Chinatown. I didn't buy the one with diamonds, because that would have cost $39.99. I counted the money, $31,000 US. Passports, there were 3 of them. They had her picture, but not her name. My immigration colleague, we counted the money. We put everything back in the Ziploc. I filled it out in a government form, signed it, and sealed the bag. As a Chinese-speaking FBI agent, I worked on a lot of cases that require my language. I remember sitting on a wiretap, eavesdropping on the Fukching gang in New York. They were terrorizing New York's Chinatown. And that's when I first heard of Sister Ping. Sister Ping owned a store on the Lower East Side, on East Broadway. That store catered to the new arrivals to New York. Turned out that was the hub of her smuggling business. She wasn't cheap. She charged $30,000 to $40,000 per head. If you wanted to be smuggled out of your village in China, you would pay a down payment with the promise that you would pay her back once you made it to the US. The government estimates she made probably $40 million in 20 years. Excuse me. I can't remember. That's why I need to practice. In 20 years. So, but if you did, when you made your way to the US, you would do whatever job you could find because you didn't speak English, plus you didn't have any papers. And sometimes Sister Ping would help you find a job because she wanted to get pay. And if you didn't get pay, she'd send the Fukching gang after you. She would kidnap you, torture you, until your family promised to pay. And I've done my shares of interviews of those victims. They never blamed Sister Ping. They always blamed the Fukching gang. When the cargo ship Golden Venture ran aground in Queens, New York, on board was 300 undocumented Chinese. They panicked and jumped to try to swim ashore. 10 people drowned. And the FBI got information that the owner of that cargo was Sister Ping. No longer a small-time store owner. She became a fugitive. She fled to China and hid for 7 years. My family's journey to the United States was much safer and a little bit cheaper. My father was the best wicker and rattan craftsman in Hong Kong. Basketville, the world's largest basket store, hired him from Hong Kong to work in Putney, Vermont. So at the age of 47, he left everything behind, including us. Not speaking a word of English, he got on the plane for the very first time and went to Putney, Vermont. After 3 years, he saved enough to send for us. When I arrived, I was almost 15. My repertoire of comprehensible English consisted of 4 words: hello, how are you? I was amazed that Captain Kirk spoke such great English. My Captain Kirk in Hong Kong spoke only Cantonese. I wanted to be like Captain Kirk. So I joined the Future Business Leaders of America in high school. I'm pretty sure that's how I got into the FBI. After I answered an ad, Uncle Sam was pointing his finger at me. Uncle Sam wanted me. He wanted me because I spoke in tongue, the Chinese tongue. So I swiped right because I thought the uncle would take me on some grand adventure. In 1985, I graduated from Quantico, the FBI Academy, and became the second Chinese FBI agent in the Bureau's history. With the Bureau, I worked all over the United States and parts of Asia, including 4 years in Hong Kong. My office in Hong Kong was in the same US consulate where years before my family stood in line waiting approval to join my father. It's also the same U.S. consulate where Sister Ping applied to come to the United States. After she made it to the United States, she made her way to New York City and started her smuggling business that grew into an empire. When it came time to board the plane, we were the first ones. I threw a jacket over her handcuffs, and we sat in the back by the bathroom. I gave her the window seat, and I sat on the aisle. She was pretty chatty, as if we were two friends flying home from a trip. She assured me that when she got to New York, her husband would pick her up. Everything would be okay, she would be free. And I thought, here we were, two immigrants sitting side by side with similar language, culture, background. We were on the opposite side of the law, each doing something she thought was right, except the government didn't pay me that much. You know, all those people that she brought to the United States, that she gave the hope and the dream of making it in the United States, to them, she was Robin Hood. When we got to New York, I hand her over to the New York agents. They cut the zip tie, read her rights, and arrested her on the US soil. They recuffed her, this time with the real thing. After the press conference, I ducked out and went to the hotel. The New York agents had booked me a room at the Waldorf Astoria on Park Avenue at government rate. And I met an old friend for drinks, and we toasted to Sister Ping. I would be the last human she brought back to the United States. Sister Ping was sentenced to 35 years. She served 8 and died in a Texas prison because she had cancer. Sherwood Forest continues to mourn her. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know what to say, except thank you so much for sharing that with us. And there is always another side to every story. Next is, did Michael show up? Michael Lockhart? Hi, Michael, you're next. Michael Lockhart, we first heard Michael tell a story of at Fresh Ground. I'm sorry, I lean, don't I? I lean right. Anyway, we first heard Michael at Fresh Ground Stories in Seattle, and we are always happy when he comes to Burien to tell his stories to us. I have no idea what his story is about. Sit back and enjoy the ride.
Okay, we're going to have a different kind of story this time. That was great. When I graduated the University of Washington, I watched all of my friends in their 20s. They started families and got married. Some of them had partners and had these great adventures. They bought homes and lawnmowers and did all of these nice things. And by the time I was 30, I was at a party with a bunch of them, and there was some alcohol involved. And I made a pronouncement to them. I said, wow, I love all of you, but I'm not doing that. I'm going to be a single parent. So I told them, I said, this seemed like a great idea at the time. And they laughed at me over that. And one of them had a good advice. Said, Mike, you can barely take care of yourself. Maybe you should practice being a parent. Why don't you check out trying to sign up for Big Brothers of King County? And I said, that is a good idea. I'll practice being a parent, and then I'll become a parent. That's what I thought was this. I really believed this. So I started going through the process of becoming a Big Brother of King County. Now it's Big Brothers Big Sisters of King County. It's a great organization. Let me tell you, it was one of the best things in the end that I ever did in my life. But the process of going through and onboarding to that organization is very thorough. There are background checks. They really call all of your relatives. They check out your work environment. They call family members, friends, work colleagues, ex-bosses. They do all of this. It's wonderful. And the last step in the process is they insist on a home visit. So when it came time for my home visit, I was a bachelor, of course, living in Gasworks Park in a tiny condominium. So I went home on that day early for the home visit, and I pretty much spent the afternoon bleaching my condo. So I cleaned everything, the refrigerator, the bathrooms, all the laundry. I think I gained 100 square feet that day in my condo. I waited for the appointment, and the social worker came to the house. This is one I had been working with. She was all happy. She answered the door. This was the mid-'90s, so we didn't have iPads or anything. She had a clipboard, obviously with a questionnaire and a pen, and she came, "Mike, this is the last step in this process. I'm sure this is going to be great, and you will be a big brother, and we will, get you to be a big brother." I said, "Yes, good." So she starts asking me questions, all normal questions. She asked questions like, did I have chemicals in the house? She looked in the refrigerator. She walked through everything. She checked the laundry. She really did walk through all these, and with every answer question I get, she took out her checklist and I went, check. And I'd answer her good. I could tell. I was killing it on the interview. Until the last 3 questions. The third to last question she asked me was, do you have any drugs in the house? And I, wanting to be honest, I said no. And in my head, it was because I live in a condominium. So I decided I didn't lie by saying no. And so she asked me the second to last question. This question was a little bit trickier. She said, do you have any pornography in the house? Or in your home? And I, again, thought about that, and I said no, but in my head I was thinking, not today. But no was the honest answer. And then she asked me the toughest, last, final question. Seemed very simple to me. She asked me, do you have any toys in the house? And I thought about it. And so we were in the living room, and I said, I thought about it. I said, oh, this is because, if it's like a rainy day, and I wanted to look really smart. So I went over to this closet, and I opened the closet, and I had things like chess. Oh, I have chess and Risk and, all the Trivial Pursuit, right? These really good games that we would be able to play with kids. Now, I know this day was a Thursday, because the night before, I had some friends over for dinner, and that would have made it Wednesday. And on Wednesday night, in the early 90s, I was part of a kind of clandestine group of friends who had this embarrassing desire to always watch a certain set of shows on Wednesday night. They were on Fox. Do you remember what these were? Beverly Hills 90210, right? Melrose Place. Oh, yeah, they were awesome. And the last one was a spin-off of that one. Wasn't very popular, but I really liked it. Models, Inc. Do you remember these 3? 8, 9, and 10 o'clock. So I'd had all these friends over for dinner that night, and that night they had brought me a joke gift of the dolls from Beverly Hills 90210. So I had a Brenda and a Dylan, the parents, Andrea, the nerdy one. I had them all. They gave them all to me. And while I was cleaning the place, what I didn't clean was this. I was in the closet checking these games. Was this bookcase? These nice bookcases I had, and they had placed all the dolls in the bookcase with only half their clothes on, in a position that was that was not very familial. So I'll never forget this. So I'm over in the side closet saying Risk and chess and watching all of these, showing how smart I am. And she is looking right at the bookcase with the clipboard and goes, "What is that? What are they doing? What are they doing?" And I looked over and about dirtied my condo, essentially. So I was like, oh no, oh my God, those are not mine. Those are not mine. It's a joke. Those were a gift. I didn't own any. I don't own dolls. And she is madly, there's not a check mark. She is madly writing things down on a piece of paper about this. And I am trying to tell her, don't. No, not mine. Joke gift. My stupid friends gave me this. Right? After sweating a little bit, she concludes, and now she's not this smiley social worker anymore. She looks at me and says, "We need to talk." So we go and sit on the couch, and she says, she puts on her best voice. She says, "Now I can't even repeat what she said this to me." She goes, "Now, Mike, I have something very serious to talk to you about. In my business, it is an odd thing for a 30-year-old man to have dolls in his house. And I'm going to need to report this. Right? In my line of work, we call these child enticers." I said, "No, this was a joke gift. They aren't really mine. They weren't here 48 hours ago." I kept insisting that. And she looks at me and she goes, "Okay, yes, I understand that, Mike, but I must report this." So the home visit ends and she leaves, and I am sweating. I literally am sweating, saying, "Oh my God, they are not going to let me in the Big Brothers." I really felt that. Immediately, I walked over to the phone, which I paused because I actually owned a phone made out of Legos at the time. So I picked up my Lego phone and called those two friends who gave me the dolls and said, "You guys gave me the dolls last night. The Big Brother interview was today, and they found the dolls all naked in the bookcases. And all they did was laugh on the other end of the phone. I was so mad. They just laughed at me. I waited like 2 weeks for that call. I said, "I know, they're going to call me and tell me, 'No, sorry, Mike, this is too strange. You can't be a Big Brother.'" But indeed, what actually ended up happening is they did call me and say, "No, welcome to the Big Brothers," right? Thank God. And so what ended up happening, I ended up being with Herman he was for almost 6 years. 6 years he was my little brother. Stayed with him till he turned 18, and it was in the end the Big Brother organization. What started off as a hot mess turned out brilliant timing, and to this day I just cannot ever say enough to people about how great this organization is, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And if you ever get a chance to go through the scary home visit, I recommend it highly. Thank you.
Trying not to do any visualization there. Thank you, Michael. That was great. So we are now at spot number 6. Anybody want to fill in with a story that hadn't signed up? Come on up. And you are?
Kate McPhail.
This is Kate McVale, and I know she's a storyteller, so here we go.
Hi. My name is Kate McPhail, and I'm Bob's big sister, in case you remembered him. This story I told last week at the Moth, and our topic was chemistry. So that'll explain a little bit about what I'm saying. So a good chemist can take a lot of different types of substances and mix them together and come up with a new substance. It's kind of like cooking. A good cook will take lots of ingredients and mix them together, and with some different techniques and different things, they can make a good meal. So my ex-husband was not a chemist, and nor was he a cook. The reason that I can tell you this story is because he was a bad cook. The reason he's my ex is because of the bad chemistry. So it was our anniversary, and I was very pleased that he actually not only remembered the right day, but he had actually gone as far as to make reservations at a nice restaurant. I mean, a real restaurant. It was wonderful. I was so excited, so I ran to my room quickly to get ready. At the time, we had 8 children. We had our 3 teenagers, and we had 5 foster children from 11 down to 2. So a night out at a nice restaurant was definitely a treat, something that didn't happen very often. So while I was getting ready, I heard my 15-year-old daughter talking to her father, and she's like, "Dad, what am I supposed to feed the kids? Because obviously we aren't going out to dinner." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, I made some stew." My heart dropped. My husband, remember, not a good cook, his idea of stew was to open the refrigerator, empty out whatever leftovers were there. Once in a while, he'd go to the pantry and throw in something from the pantry, and he'd throw it all in a big pot, pour a half a bottle of ketchup in it, apply heat. That was stew. Sometimes it was almost edible, but not usually. And when he mixed these ingredients together, he never thought too much about, like, do these textures match? Do the flavors match? Do the smells match? Does anything match? He didn't really think about that. It was just a pot of stew. So Christy immediately came in to complain to Mom, hoping for some support. And I did give her a lot of sympathy. But I told her, I said, well, look at it this way. This way you don't have to fix the meal. All you have to do is serve it and clean up afterwards. And I said, I promise you I will cook your favorite meal tomorrow night, so to make up for tonight. So she was a little bit pacified. We left. We went to a restaurant, very, very nice restaurant. It was quiet, kind of low lights, candles on the table. It was very, very soft music playing. Nobody cried. Nobody complained about the food. Nobody stabbed somebody else with a fork. It was a wonderful, wonderful meal. And it was served by a waitress that was very polite. The meal was plated beautifully. It was just a gorgeous meal, and it tasted delicious. I did have a little pang about halfway through dinner, thinking of my children not enjoying their dinner. So we got home after this lovely dinner, and the house was fairly calm. The kids were still up, and everybody looked pretty happy. So I thought, well, that must have gone well. And I walked into the kitchen, and I was pleasantly surprised because the kitchen was spotless. The table was cleaned off, the counters were clean, all the dishes were put where they belonged in the cupboards. They'd even swept the floor and taken out the garbage. I was totally impressed. That didn't usually happen. And so I made a big deal of it, and I told Christy, I'm so proud of you and the boys for helping, and all the kids must have helped because it's beautiful. And so I asked the kids, did you have fun? And they all nodded. And Justin, who was 6, said, we did something really cool. And then they rushed him out of the room. I don't know what that was all about. Anyway, let's fast forward 20 years later. I'm having a visit with my daughter and my youngest son. And we're talking about the good old days with the big house and all the kids. We had a lot of foster kids over the years, and lots of great memories of these kids. And we were talking about that particular house, and Scott looked over at Christy and said, I wonder if it's still there. She started to laugh. I looked at him and said, if what is still where? Then they told me the rest of the story about that night. So we had left, and it was time to eat. Christy went to the stove and lifted the lid, looked at the stew, and thought, well, let's give Manuel some. Now, Manuel was 2. He was a roly-poly little guy. He would eat anything, but he would not eat that stew. He very loudly denied any relationship to that stew. So they look at each other and think, now what do we do? Well, Christy, my daughter, was the queen of innovation. And they all knew this. Everybody looked up to Christy because she could come up with the best ideas. So she said, I have an idea. It'll take care of the food problem, and it'll take care of the cleanup problem. So they all trooped out, all 8 of them, out to the backyard. The boys got shovels. They dug a hole, a nice deep hole. They dumped the pan with the soup and the ladle and buried it. The little kids were given the job of helping to cover up the burial site. So they got leaves and sticks and twigs and rocks, and they covered it all up so it did not look like a freshly dug grave. Mom never saw it. I never noticed that there was a big hole in the yard. I never realized that my pan had disappeared. So my son summed up the whole story very well. I couldn't have done it better myself. He said, someday, 100 years or so down the road, somebody's going to dig that up. And they're going to analyze it, and they're going to say, no wonder these people died out. Look what they ate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would have noticed my pan was missing, but I probably would not have missed that stew from your description. Next, we have Deborah Apple. Deborah has been telling stories for years and is very generous, sharing her love and knowledge of the craft of storytelling. She usually takes us out of the country with her stories. We'll see where we go with this one. Come on up, Deborah.
I grew up in a musical family, and at 7, I started piano lessons. But what stands out in my mind from those years was the stink of the teacher's house, which was a combination of mothballs and the cat litter box. It just made me gag every time I walked in there. Junior high was a better musical experience because we had band and we could choose an instrument. I started flute. And I never practiced really much, but it was all about marching in the Memorial Day parade and, giving little concerts. But I didn't get very good at it. I get to high school, and in the band, I was one of 24 flutes. So the day that the band director said, I really would like it if someone would volunteer to play French horn, my hand went up first, and I got a beautiful, shiny French horn with a deep, melodious sound, and I just loved it. And instead of being one of 24, I was one of 3. And the 3 of us made a huge contribution to the sound of the band, and that was so cool that I started practicing. I'd stay after school and practice, and I practiced and practiced. So by sophomore year, I'd really improved. And the band leader saw to it that I was able to participate in a regional orchestra thing in my state. I was in Connecticut. So I went there, and what I found was that I really wasn't very good, even though I'd been practicing. These other kids were really dedicated, and they were excellent players. And I realized I haven't put in enough time. I wanted to up my game, so I practiced and I practiced. So by junior year, I had an explosion of improvement. My tone, my technique, everything about it I'd improved, and I enjoyed it so much. So the band leader said, I think you're ready to audition for All-State Band. And I'm like, All-State? Okay. So I did. The audition was in a room with 2 judges. First, I played a piece that I'd practiced, and it went really well. The second part of the audition was sight reading. And what that means is they stick a piece of music in front of you that you probably have not seen before. And so I knew that was coming. I looked at it and I thought, it looks pretty doable. I can do that. I started playing, and I got lost immediately. I had no idea where I was. It was like all these black lines and circles and dots were swimming before my eyes. But I just kept playing. I just made it up as I went along. And I saw these 2 guys look at each other in disbelief, like, what is she doing? But I kept playing and playing. And then I thought, it might be time to wrap it up. And I stopped. I just stopped. And they looked at each other. And they looked at me and they said, thank you. We'll let you know. Well, about 2 weeks later, I got a letter, and it said, you're an all-state band. I was the last chair of the French horns, but I was in. And I just thought it was pretty cool. So I went to that, and I found that these kids were way, way ahead of me. I mean, this was the cream of the crop in the state. Small state, but still, it was really a great experience. So this was like the high point so far of my musical career, and I just loved it. But in that summer between junior and senior year, I qualified to go to Guatemala for the summer for 2 months. And I really wanted to go because I'd been very interested in Spanish for years, and this was going to be my opportunity. But I had to take my French horn. I mean, there's no way you're going to be not practicing for 2 months. After 3 years of really investing in this, I got my lip where I wanted it. I had to take it, so I took it. I figured I can work it so I can practice an hour a day. I mean, an hour a day should keep me up to par. So I got there, and this country knocked me out. The entire country smelled of corn, from the fresh tortillas that were made all day in every home, on every street, all over. The large numbers of indigenous people wore these brightly colored clothes that to me looked like costumes, not clothes. And there was the sound of marimba music, something I wasn't used to. It just was so cool. I loved it. We lived with families, host families, and went to a high school. And in the high school, I had seen to it that I would have a room and time every day to practice the French horn, and I did diligently. But as time went on, the pull of going out and exploring Guatemala City was a lot stronger than my desire to practice the French horn. Because for the first time, I was independent. I was free. I was out on my own. I could go out with friends and we'd wander around the market and we'd just explore the whole place. One afternoon, I was on the bus by myself, looking out the window and marveling at the colors in this country, the trees, the flowers, the birds, the sky. Everything was so brilliant and exotic looking. I heard Spanish all around me, and I looked ahead, and I saw this girl with long hair in a bright yellow dress. And I said, "That's me." I saw myself in the rearview mirror of the bus, and I thought, I belong here. I fit in. I look like I'm part of this country. And it was just this moment of realizing that something was going on, and that maybe my future was connected to traveling in Latin America or even living in Latin America. One day, the music teacher at school said to me, "I've got a big surprise for you." And I said, "Hey, cool, what is it?" And he said, "You are going to play with the Guatemalan National Symphony Orchestra." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Oh, they are so honored to have the esteemed American French horn player with them on stage." And I said, whoa. I said, "I'm a, high school student. I don't belong on stage. I can't." He goes, no, it's all set. It's going to be great." I clearly remember the night of the concert, going there with my host family. They were all dolled up. They sat near the front because they were bursting with pride that their student was up there playing with the National Orchestra. I remember clearly being up there with the National Orchestra, and for the most part, I faked it. And what I mean by that is that I was just pretending to play, but not actually blowing into it with the lip and making a sound. And I don't know if I was just afraid that I was going to mess it up, play the wrong notes, and everybody would know it was me, or if my heart wasn't in it anymore. I felt like something had changed. I got home. I had my senior year in high school. I continued to play in the band, and I loved it, but I never practiced. Instead, I took Spanish at a college in the next town. I scoured every record store I could find for Latin American music. I read books. I got that big hardcover Spanish-English dictionary. And after graduation, I headed to Mexico. I took that bright yellow dress and some bright Guatemalan blouses, and I left the French horn behind. Thank you. Do you still want me to give a spiel on Fresh Ground? Okay, so we heard about Fresh Ground stories from our wonderful moth teller, but just a little more information. This is a storytelling group that's been around since, I think, 2010. It's had various Starbucks until, as the leader says, I closed down like 3 Starbucks by myself. So now it meets in Queen Anne, and the best way to learn about it is to go to, they have a, what do you call that, a meetup page. So you go to Fresh Ground Stories Meetup, and it'll come up. It has all the information you need. And basically what it is it will have a theme for that month. It's the 3rd Thursday of the month at 7 o'clock. And the way they do it is it's run by a wonderful man named Paul Carrington, who's an incredible storyteller, great teacher. And he's got a coffee pot, like the carafe from a Mr. Coffee or something. And you take a little piece of paper, and if you're a first-time storyteller, you take yellow, and if you're, had done it before, white, you write your name, you throw it in the thing, and he picks them out. So that's how they do it. But you need to be prepared, and it's 8 minutes, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great storytelling and people. So Fresh Ground Stories Meetup, just want you to know we're doing a little song and dance. They do it for us, we're doing it for them. So, okay, back to Peggy.
Thank you. I'm all ready to put on a yellow dress. That was wonderful. Well, thank everybody for being here tonight. Thank you especially to the wonderful storytellers that we had. And it's just really nice to see everybody here. And I think we'll look forward to seeing you again next month. And let's fill this room again. Meanwhile, Sybil, if I'm missing anything, let me know. I do want to remind you that we need your support. We have a little basket up here, and if you can give just a little bit, then we'll be here for you in the future. And it was a very nice evening, and the fish were perfect. They were nice. So, unless somebody has anything else they want to add or ask, we will call it a wonderful evening and see you next month.